ADP player-turned-coach takes dramatic stand against ITIA following doping confession. The tennis world has been rocked by a startling and deeply personal admission from former Australian ATP player Marinko Matosevic, who has publicly acknowledged using a prohibited method during his playing career while simultaneously launching a scathing attack on the International Tennis Integrity Agency, ITIA. Now 40 and long retired from professional tennis, Matosevic's confession has reignited debate around anti-doping procedures, investigative transparency, and the treatment of players after retirement. Matosevic, who reached a career-high singles ranking of world number 39, has not competed professionally since February 2018 and officially retired in November of that year. Yet, despite having been out of the game for more than 6 years, he found himself thrust back into the spotlight in 2024 when tennis authorities revealed he was under ITIA investigation for the use of a prohibited method. According to Matosevic, the investigation relates to events that took place in early 2018, near the very end of his career, and, more controversially, an inquiry he claims he never even knew existed until years later, but a public confession and a candid statement shared with the First Serve. Matosevic chose to confront the allegations head-on, offering both an admission of wrongdoing and a fierce denunciation of the process he says has been mishandled from the start. It's with a heavy heart and a clear mind as I write this, Matosevic said. I've been under investigation by the ITIA since the Rome Masters 2024. The investigation is centered on a prohibited method I used in February 2018. I can confirm it's true. The honesty of the confession caught many by surprise, particularly given the time that has elapsed since his retirement. Yet Matosevic made it clear that his admission was not an endorsement of the ITIA's handling of the case. On the contrary, he argued that the investigation itself was fundamentally flawed. Even though the ITIA has no real evidence of my wrongdoing, I have decided to admit what I did due to the corrupt process and the ridiculous nature of the other charges. He added, allegations of corruption and process failures. Matosevic's strongest words were reserved for the ITIA, the body responsible for safeguarding the integrity of professional tennis. Branding the organization corrupt, he accused investigators of constructing an unfair case and relying on what he views as weak or circumstantial grounds rather than clear, timely evidence. His claim that he was unaware of the investigation until years after allegedly began raises uncomfortable questions for tennis authorities. Transparency and due process are central pillars of any anti-doping framework, and Matosevic's account suggests serious communication breakdowns, if not procedural negligence, within the system. While the ITIA has not publicly detailed the full scope of its evidence, the resurfacing of a case tied to actions from 2018 has drawn criticism from fans and analysts alike. Many have questioned whether pursuing retired players years after the fact serves justice or simply reopens wounds without delivering meaningful deterrence. The circumstances behind the violation, perhaps the most revealing part of Matosevic's statement, was his explanation of the personal struggles that led to his violation. In a rare moment of vulnerability, the former Australian described a period of desperation marked by health issues and declining confidence. Under desperate circumstances, I had some health issues in 2017. I stupidly and recklessly did a blood transfusion in Morelos, Mexico, he admitted. I was so disgusted with myself, I retired the following week at the age of 32 and a half. The use of a blood transfusion, a method banned under anti-doping regulations due to its performance-enhancing potential, represents a serious breach of the rules. Yet Matosevic's account frames the decision less as a calculated attempt to gain an edge and more as a moment of personal collapse at the end of a grueling career. His immediate retirement, by his own telling, was driven by shame and self-reproach rather than fear of detection. That detail has led some to view his confession as an act of belated accountability rather than damage control, at a career overshadowed late during his prime. Matosevic was known as a solid tour professional, capable of challenging top players and holding his own in the game's most competitive era. His career, however, was marked by inconsistency and frustration, with injuries and form fluctuations preventing him from fully capitalizing on his talent. Now, years later, his legacy risks being redefined by events that occurred in its final chapter. The timing of the ITIA investigation has made the situation even more complicated, as Matosevic has since transitioned into coaching and life beyond the tour. For many observers, the case highlights the psychological toll of professional tennis, a sport that demands constant travel, physical resilience, and mental toughness, often with little margin for error. Broader implications for tennis Matasevic's stand against the ITIA arrives at a time when tennis continues to grapple with questions of integrity, fairness, and governance. While strict anti-doping enforcement is essential to maintaining a level playing field, critics argue that opaque investigations and delayed action can undermine trust just as much as the violations themselves. His case underscores the need for clearer timelines, better communication with players, and a system that balances accountability with procedural fairness, especially when dealing with retired athletes. Whether Matasevic's allegations of corruption will prompt deeper scrutiny of the ITIA remains to be seen. What is certain is that his confession has reopened an uncomfortable conversation within the sport. A complicated legacy Marinko Matosevic story is not one of simple villains and heroes. It is a complex narrative involving personal struggle, admitted wrongdoing, and a fierce challenge to the institutions meant to protect the sport. By choosing to speak publicly, he has accepted responsibility for his actions while refusing to stay silent about what he sees as systemic failure. As the controversy continues to unfold, tennis fans and officials alike are left to wrestle with difficult questions. How should past violations be handled when careers are already over? And how can the sport ensure integrity without losing humanity in the process? For Matosevic, the confession appears to be both an act of closure and defiance, a final dramatic stand that ensures his voice is heard, even years after he left the court.